happened. And so she didn't have passion anymore. And so when we finally figured that out, she realized that her why expired. And so some of you in this room, your why expired because it already happened. And so I would really encourage you to do some soul searching. And so once Lily figured out what her why was, that year she completed her first top sales director trip. And now she's about 6 sales directors from becoming a national sales director. Wow. And it all comes back to the why, because each one of you is skilled. Each one of you is gifted. You have the ability. I mean, truly, you guys have the best of the best teaching you in this room. But it really starts with you and you knowing crystal clear why you want to do this and how it's going to make you feel when you're done. You know, a few months ago, I had the opportunity to have lunch with National Sales Director Ann Newberry. And if you don't know who Ann Newberry is, she is like Mary Kay. I mean, she's probably the closest thing to Mary Kay that I will have ever come into contact with. And we had lunch, and I asked her some pretty tough questions. And one of the questions that I asked was, Ann, if you could tell me one thing, what is one thing that the sales force that you're most disappointed in, that you're seeing? And without even thinking, she looked into my eyes and she said, Leah, they're trading what they want most for what they want now. They're trading what they want most for what they want now. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, because she was right. Because we live in a society where it's, quick fix. I want it now. I want it now. Instead of really looking at the big picture. And you see, there were several years before I had my son that I worked extremely hard. People might look at my story and say, gosh, you moved so fast, and I did, but I also worked my business 60 to 80 hours a week so that I could become a national sales director within 7 years and not do it in 10 to 15 years. So I just worked hard. And there were times that I didn't want to do it. There were times that I was tired. There were sacrifices that I had to make. But every time I got into my car, every time I zipped up my starter kit bag, I had that little boy that didn't even exist yet. I had him in my mind, and I knew that one day I wanted to have him have choices that were important to me. And so, this next week, you guys, when I started my Mary Kay business, we lived in a little tiny 700 square foot apartment. I was not someone that had a lot of money when I started. In fact, part of my story is that I was the girl that would go to Starbucks, and it was like going to Las Vegas. I would slide my card through and pray to God that I won. You know what I mean? And I got approved. And that's funny to think of, but when you're talking about a $3, $4 coffee, that's pretty pathetic. That's how I was living my life. And now 7 years later from that, so going from a 700 square foot apartment to now 7 years later of consistently working my business, we're about to put an offer next week on a 100-acre ranch in Texas. And it's got 100-year-old oak trees on it. It's got a safe place for my children to run around. It's got a beautiful 4,500 square foot house and a stable that can hold 16 horses. And above the stable is a studio that will be my Mary Kay headquarters. It's got beautiful white picket fencing, just like you'd see on Anne of Green Gables. I mean, it's just everything that I would want for my children to grow up on. And so that's a perfect example of not trading what you want now for what you really want most. And so I really took that to heart, what Anne said. Okay, so back to inspiring others through your why. The best example that was given to me was Dr. Martin Luther King. And I never thought about this until it was presented to me, but I want you to think about this. When he gave his I Have a Dream speech, back then they didn't have social media. I mean, imagine if they had like Facebook and Twitter. I mean, the turnout would have been crazy. And so it was all word of mouth. 2.5 weeks before he gave that speech, it was passed word of mouth that he would be appearing and people were going to rally together. And I've gone back and listened to the full speech in its entirety. And, if you listen to his speech, he never once gives a solution for ending discrimination. All it has to do with his vision and his hope for the future. Never once is there a plan. Otherwise, it'd be called the I Have a Plan speech. And he doesn't say that because maybe he didn't necessarily know how it was going to be done, but he had a vision that it would happen. And guess what? It did happen. And so that's what we need to do in our Mary Kay businesses. We need to stop getting so caught up in the plan, because you all know the plan. You know what needs to happen in order for it to happen. Instead, you need to start having vision and not walking in your reality, but walking in your possibility. Don't be afraid to dream. You guys, I am the craziest dreamer that you will ever meet. Had I had about 5 extra minutes, I probably would have driven you out to the empty field I've been making phone calls in, because I wanted to have that visual of land in front of me. But, you know, when I first started my business, my very first goal was to buy my first home. And living in California as a young woman, that's near impossible because the real estate market was so bad. And so, you know, I went to the model home of the house that I wanted for a year and a half. And I would climb up the spiral staircase and I would go into the master bedroom, and for a year and a half, every single Thursday, I would make my booking calls. And if someone came in, I would just go hide in the bathroom. But I would make my booking calls in front of the fireplace in the master bedroom. And you guys, a year and a half later, my husband and I bought that exact house. And we paid for it with my Mary Kay income. His income did not pay for it. And so I'm here to tell you that when you put your dreams in front of you that crystal clear, they will become a reality. I made a goal poster a couple of years ago, put it on my front door. You know, don't hide your goal posters behind your desk or where no one can see them. It needs to be in a place that's going to, like Gloria Mayfield Banks always says, to, you know, trash your home with your goals. And I couldn't agree more. And so it was on my front door. And a year later, you guys, 98% of that goal poster had been completed. And so I really believe in the power of putting your dreams in front of your face. And, you know, some of you might also, part of that different decision I was talking about is some of you were raised in homes where you didn't do that. You know, maybe your parents were 9-to-5ers. And so, you know, one thing I found in Mary Kay is that if you do not have parents that are entrepreneurs or grandparents that are entrepreneurs, you have to completely retrain the way that you think. It's not that you can't be successful in Mary Kay, but you have to be open to the possibility of thinking like an entrepreneur. And entrepreneurs think this way. They're willing to work 80 hours a week for themselves so that they don't have to work 40 hours a week for someone else. And that is the God's honest truth. Yep. They're willing to work 80 hours a week for themselves so they don't have to work 40 hours a week for somebody else. And let me tell you, there's so much freedom and choices in not having to ask permission. Ari Hathaway and I were talking a few months ago, and she asked me, Leah, what motivates you most? And without even thinking, like no one had ever even asked me, and people say, what's your why? Or, you know, why do you do this? But she said, what motivates you? And without even thinking, I said, the alternative. She went, let's talk about that. And so I began to tell her about Betty, and I'm going to tell you guys about my friend Betty. Betty was a woman that took me in when I was a young woman. I was about 18 years old, and I rented a room from her, and she took me out of a very bad housing situation that I was in, and she let me rent a room from her and her husband. And Betty, her name was Betty Bean, and Betty Bean is everything that you would think Betty Bean would be. You know, she baked casseroles, southern accent, red hair, just sweet as pie, sweet. And Betty and I were very close. She was like a second mom to me. And gosh, it's been almost a year ago, I got a phone call from her daughter, and Betty had been down in Disneyland with her grandson, and she had some pain in her shoulder, and she went into the doctor, and the doctor basically said, you have 2 weeks left to live. You have cancer all throughout your body. You're not leaving this hospital. Could you imagine feeling like perfectly fine, and then the doctor tells you, and she's young, she's in her early 50s, and the doctor says, you have 2 weeks left to live, you're not going anywhere. And so, of course, as soon as I found out, I rushed to the hospital, and I sat by Betty's bedside, and I wrote cards for her. I prayed with her, I sang to her. And in my peripheral vision, what was so heartbreaking is I was seeing her daughter scrambling, trying to get daycare for her son. I saw her trying to figure out how she could afford to take time off of work. I saw her husband trying to negotiate with his boss to take time off from work. I saw her son-in-law not being able to be there because his boss said, we need you, we'll fire you if you leave. And there I was sitting holding her hand, and I didn't have to ask anybody. I didn't have to check in with anybody. I didn't have to ask if it was okay. And you know what? When she took her last breath, I had no regrets at all.